Well, morning, Dan.
Thanks you once again.
Oh, no worries, mate. I've got to keep you happy, mate.
Yeah.
You know. So I'm back here again.
Back
but
with
not,
another
but
vehicle.
not with the Prado.
Yeah.
So I'm really lucky. Dan's going to have a once over. This is the Mitsubishi Challenger that Lachlan's bought. So we're going to give it the once over, see if there's any little problems with it, and see what needs to be fixed up. You know, things like brakes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we'll just go over it in general, and you don't know the vehicle, I don't know the vehicle.
No, we'll soon find out.
Looks like it's had a few bits and pieces done to it, and it's travelled a little bit,
Yeah,
I'd say.
yeah.
So we'll just give it the once over, and
Yeah, I've done this a bit backwards, haven't I? Because normally
Yeah.
you do this before you buy the vehicle.
yeah, that's all right.
But,
too late.
Yeah. But Lockie, he really wanted it, so I said, all right, we'll check it out, and we'll buy it and get it checked out. So make it all safe for him.
That's it. Yeah.
So what do you reckon, mate? What's the first thing that you do?
Well, first thing we'll do, I think we'll just have a look through the engine bay here.
Yep.
If you've got any service history on it, we'll have a look at that. And then, after that, we'll put it up on the hoist and go over it underneath with a fine-tooth comb and see what we can or can't find.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now I'm just on the offside. As I pulled in, another car pulled in. And guess what it was?
It was
a Prado.
It was another 150 series Prado.
So that's a bit older than mine.
It is about 5 years older than yours.
Yeah. And they must have watched one of my videos on you, mate.
They did. That's the first thing they said to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. Dan must be a good bloke. So
I've had a few now. I've had
Isn't
a
that
few.
great?
Yeah.
So if you need your car looking at, Dan is the man.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that. Yeah. So we'll have to a bit later on just have a bit of a check to see what that car maybe is in.
Yeah, we can go over that one.
Yeah.
That one's a bit interesting. So.
Yeah. So he's a Prado.
Yeah.
You're the Prado man, mate. You're the
So
Prado fixer upper. All right. Well, let's get into it.
Okay.
So Dan, what have you discovered so far? It needs a bit of a top up on the clutch.
Yeah, clutch fluid is just a little bit low, that's all.
Yeah.
We'll check underneath in a sec just to see if there's any leaks there, but I'm going to say that it is just gone a bit low over time. The fluid actually looks fairly clean, so...
Yep.
But yeah, while you're here, we may as well top a few bits and pieces up, so yeah.
And you've just checked the brake fluid, you said that's pretty clean, so...
Yeah, I don't think that's been done that long ago.
Okay.
Looks pretty healthy, the brake fluid. And you're always going to be careful with these clutch fluid reservoirs because they're so small. And when you're doing a lot of forward driving and that, I mean obviously you're using the clutch a lot, that fluid will tend to heat up. So the less fluid you've got in there, sometimes you can actually get a bit of clutch fade.
Yeah, okay.
You know, you actually won't get kind of full travel on your clutch. You can feel that you're getting a bit of binding there and that won't fully disengage. So it is rare, but I have had it, and I've gone back to that and found that they're low, and the fluid's obviously, you know, fairly warm after continuously in and out on the clutch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just a thing to bear in mind on any big trips like that. Just check all the fluids.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't got any fluid out on the track, it's not gonna be too too handy.
Yeah, we're changing gears with no clutch.
Yeah, that's right. Looks like a fairly new filter.
Yep, the boys have been onto it, giving it a bit of a service.
They have done this, right?
They did that one, yeah.
Right, well, that's good. Yeah, highly recommend, you know, when you buy a vehicle, a used vehicle, and you've got it back at home for the first time, even though you've probably got a roadworthy and you've been told it's got a good service history and so on and so forth, it doesn't hurt just to pop the bonnet and check these things for yourself, because Unfortunately, as much as I'd like to say that roadworthies are gospel, they're not, and you really need to kind of just, you know, anyone can do this. Lift the bonnet, just run around, check the fluids, check your filters, because yeah, sometimes they're not all that great.
Yeah, and they can show telltale signs of maybe if the vehicle hasn't been looked after or something.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So Dan, so this kind of check is probably a good thing to do if you picked out the car you want to buy.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure it's all good. This is probably the advisable thing to do, isn't it? To check it in and.
Yeah, like before purchasing any used vehicle, I highly recommend getting someone to have a thorough look at it.
Yep.
RSEQ do a very good pre-purchase inspection. Like, it's very thorough. But even if you've just got someone with you who's fairly mechanically minded that can just have a glance over, because it's fairly commonplace that people do end up buying vehicles that potentially do have a fairly major problem that's been concealed and covered up. And then the problem now becomes yours.
So you mentioned RSEQ, but is that something that if they booked in with you, they could?
I do quite a lot of pre-purchase inspections. You just book it in. If it's from a car yard, I haven't had a car yard yet that said no to someone else checking over a vehicle, even though they've given you a roadworthy with it. They are more than happy to let you take it away to your own independent mechanic to have a check over. And private sales, I've done a fair few of those as well. I guess if it's a legitimate sale and the vehicle's good, the person who's selling the vehicle's not going to have a problem with you taking it in to get it inspected anyway. If they do, that may ring alarm bells a little bit, I guess, straight away. It is a really good idea, because there's lots of things that you can see on a hoist, and when you've got a good view of the vehicle, there's a lot of things you can see that you can't when they're just sitting on the ground in someone's driveway, whatever the case may be. So that's obviously why we're here today, is so we can get a full rundown of where the vehicle's at. Well, the main aim is it's for obviously for Lachlan, the young fella, so we want it to be fairly trouble-free as we can. At least we know we've got a benchmark. We're starting from that point, and we look after it from there. And I mean, the good thing is you drove it here.
It's been full driving.
That's a bonus, because I've had a couple turn up on tow trucks before for pre-purchase. I just bought this and it's got a problem already.
Oh no!
So so you drove it here.
No, it's been Glasshouse Mountains, Dan. So
it's already stood the test for a couple of weeks.
So we're all good from that side of it. Dan's just noticed we've got diff lock breathers in here, so he's just popping them back into place.
I assume they're going to be the breathers for the lockers. They could be diff breathers, but we'll have a look, see where these go in a sec. Usually your breathers for your diff locks will be a little bit bigger than these ones here, but we'll check it all out anyway. I would say that the lines have potentially shrunk or been pulled slightly there, and they've come out of their little filters. We'll put them back in because we don't want water going and mud going down.
No, definitely not.
No. I think.
Bit of a weep on the power steering lines, did you say, down there?
Yeah, so the actual, the feed line that goes down to the pump, there's a little bit of a weep. The hose feels fairly brittle there. Just age, I'm going to say it is the original one. So we'll probably put a new piece of hose in there, some transmission cooler hose, and a couple of worm drive clamps. Top one seems fine, which is the return line.
We'll get a list of all these things that we need to be done at the end.
We'll make up a nice list for it. One very important thing that I should mention, and it is probably the most important thing in my eyes when you buy a vehicle, is be aware of whether your vehicle has a timing belt or not, because if it does, no matter what you think or feel or what you've been told, get it checked. Now, I don't mean have someone look through the book and say, oh yeah, it was done here. Physically have someone check the belt, pull the cover off, have a look at it. I did have a couple earlier in the year that the vehicles were very tidy, you know, and people had paid a decent amount for these second hand, and one of them, I didn't even come in for anything to do with the timing belt, but alarm bells were ringing to me that there was no history on it. It didn't look like the timing cover had ever been pulled off, and at that point in time, with the kilometres it had on the vehicle, it would have been about 50,000 overdue. Lo and behold, pull the cover off, the timing belt is on the verge of snapping. It was so perished, there was nothing left of it hardly. So obviously we did the belt there and then, because had it snapped, it would have ruined that whole engine. And it was a turbo diesel, 3-litre turbo diesel. It would have been in the thousands to repair. You know, a few $100s to put a new timing belt on it, and yeah. So that was lucky, because I said to him, I think they were probably a couple of weeks away from that thing snapping. It was that bad. And I've had a few over the years that have been like that. I've caught them just in time. Unfortunately, there was one earlier on in the year that I didn't.
Well, I'm already convinced, but you're just double convincing me why it's important to bring your car in for a once over.
Yeah, it's really important. Timing belts, like no matter what happens to the rest of the vehicle, a lot of the time, engine repairs are the most costly thing.
And sometimes can be avoidable.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, if your timing belt snaps, well, a lot of modern vehicles, they're all interference engines. If it snaps, that's it. It's gone through. It's toast. Yeah, it's done. So always double check the timing belt. Yeah. Or get someone who is capable, or book it in with someone to just say, look, can you just quickly check my timing belt for me? Yeah. Really important. Yeah.
So speaking of timing belts, Dan, you're about to inspect this one.
Yeah, we're going to take a look. In a lot of cases, a section or the top half of the timing cover should be fairly easy to remove. Some vehicles they aren't. It might take you 10 minutes or so to remove it and have a look, but it is vitally necessary as far as I'm concerned. So we'll have a bit closer look with the torch. And as we can see there, the belt looks to be in pretty good condition.
Awesome.
Kind of what you're looking for with these anyway is perforation, like perishing, little perforations and splits, and fraying of the belt on the edges as well. When they get fairly old, they fray. Also, they stretch. But yeah, the main thing is to actually have a look at the condition of the back of the belt here. If you can see any cracks or perishing, it is time. It's time to do it. And you don't want to be replacing belts that are like that. You want to replace them when they still look in good condition, because you've definitely done them in time.
So there's a bit involved to get one of them out, is it? Or?
Yeah, with these there is a little bit involved in it. They're not the easiest ones to do in the world.
So like the Prados, if you're doing a belt, a timing belt, would you do the pump as well? Some people recommend.
Well, I kind of have a bit of a method with the 1KDs, and this is my opinion. I feel that the water pumps on a 1KD are good enough to do basically two timing belt cycles. So I've very rarely had a water pump on a 1KD leak before 150,000 kilometres, which is your first timing belt schedule. So usually you'll get away with doing your first timing belt, and then on the second one you would replace your pump. Again, I've had a few, but I always check the condition of them. I have had the odd few where they've actually leaked prior to 150,000. Yeah, but most of them I haven't had one leak before 300,000. They're a pretty solid unit, those water pumps. The genuine water pumps on most Toyota genuine water pumps they're really good. Yeah. So if it looks in perfect condition, I would leave it for its first belt, and then when the second one comes around, no matter what it looks like, replace it, because it's probably not going to do 450,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with this, so when I'm looking here, with my limited mechanical knowledge, to get into all of that, are you taking a water pump off for that? To get to it all? Or?
Well, the timing belt or the water pump is driven by the timing belt on this.
Yeah.
Now, this all comes down to experience, really, and knowing what vehicles you should and shouldn't be doing stuff to. No matter what condition this was in, if I do a timing belt on one of these vehicles, I'm going to replace the water pump.
Okay.
Now, there's two reasons for that. A, the water pumps are not the best in the world. They're not like a Toyota.
So we're talking about a Mitsubishi, the
Yeah.
V6.
The 3.5 V6.
Yep, that's what we got in here.
Yeah. Those water pumps will not last like a Toyota one. And secondly, which is the more important reason, is the timing belt runs on the water pump.
Yeah, okay.
So if I put a brand new belt on here at 100,000, or let's say for example at 200,000, I put a brand new belt on here, and that water pump hasn't been replaced, and at 250,000 the water pump then fails, it is also going to take the timing belt out with it because the belt runs on that pump. So if the water pump fails and you know you get play in the actual water bearings of the water pump there, it's potentially going to spit your timing belt off.
So you might as well do it probably the first time.
Yeah. So I actually class a water pump in this particular setup as part of the timing gear.
Yep, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Fair enough.
Another thing to check as well, if you've got an engine fan with a viscous hub, is just to have a feel of the condition of that, because what you actually want to have is a fair bit of resistance there. You don't want the fan to continue spinning. You actually want a fair bit of resistance there. So if you can, there is another way of doing this, but it's not what I would recommend doing, and it's not the safest thing. But this here is kind of a fairly good test. If you can spin that fan, it only maybe does a quarter of a turn after you've let go. It's in fairly good condition.
Which is the case there, Dan?
Yeah.
It's looking all right.
Yeah. So it feels pretty good, that viscous hub. Fairly important as well, because these a lot of V6 engines that are kind of set up like this, they're fairly high revving, and if you don't have a fan that pulls enough air through, the temperature can kind of sit up a little bit higher than what you'd want it to. And you might not notice it at first, but you sometimes get things like when you're going up hills or sitting on maybe 110 on the highway, where the revs are just up a little bit, the temperature's kind of just slowly creeps up. And sometimes you can even notice that your air conditioning isn't quite as cool as what it should be, and that's because the radiators are like superheating, and then you get a bit of heat soak from the condenser as well. So, and a lot of the times I've found it's because of these viscous hubs. They're not locking up enough and pulling enough air through. Yeah. So that's just another little thing to check.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's actually over full at the moment. But,
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Boys telling me a porcupine then.
Yeah, I would say it's a touch over full, but
Yeah, okay. So the boys did the oil change, Dan?
yeah,
They did all that themselves?
the oil looks pretty clean.
Yeah. Standard thing, hey, to check the radiator?
Yeah, check over the radiator. I'd say that this has been replaced by the looks of it. This isn't the genuine radiator, and it seems to be in good condition. I wouldn't say it's all that old.
Okay.
But yeah, we always check the coolant at the radiator. Sometimes you can get little air pockets, and you may look like you've got plenty of coolant in your recovery tank, but you might have a little air pocket in the top tank of the radiator. Another important thing, there's lots of important things, the condition of your radiator cap.
Yep.
very important. We get a lot of Jeeps especially that have overheating issues, and not that the engine is overheating and cooking, the engine is running hotter than what it should be, and the thermo fans are actually staying on for an extended period. And what we found is they're developing an air pocket again in the top of the radiator, and on the V6 Wrangler engines they develop an air pocket up near the oil cooler, and that's where the actual temperature sensor is housed, and you end up getting a bit of excessive heat in there because there's an air gap basically, so the coolant wants to turn to steam. And sometimes you actually get them overflowing and bubbling through their recovery tank because they've actually created an air pocket in there, and essentially they've lost pressure because there's an air pocket. Radiator cap's been the culprit nearly every time. The seals perish, or they don't actually hold pressure, and you get basically pressure in the cooling system bypasses the cap and just forces its way straight into the header tank, into the recovery tank. And a system that's not pressurized will heat up, will overheat. So another thing is just to check the condition of the cap, make sure the seal is in good condition, and it's not split or perished, and just have a bit of a feel. There's a little spring in there, just make sure that does move in and out the way it should. And another sign as well is if you do have a big air pocket in the top of your radiator but your recovery tank is full, that usually means that it's not recovering and sucking back. So probably wouldn't hurt to put a cap on it. They're incredibly cheap. $10-15 for a cap.
And how's that one looking, Dan?
I would replace it because if you have a look on the edges here, it might be a bit hard to see on the camera, but you can see some very fine little splits and perishing on that diaphragm just there. You can kind of just see that. If I see that there, a couple of little splits like that. And it isn't the rubber isn't all that supple. It's fairly
getting a bit old.
Fairly firm. So I would put a new cap on. This is usually there'll be a pressure rating written on the side. So just make sure that you do have one that is correct for the vehicle. So we'll probably get hold of another one. I'll put this one back on for the moment. Get hold of another one. So we were just checking. These usually are renowned for having the odd few oil leaks on these V6s, but this one's very, very clean. Very dry. So I'd say that someone has sealed it up and done it properly. There is a kind of a certain technique I've adopted with these particular rocker covers to seal them up, and it's nice and dry, so I would say it's been done well. But they make a hell of a mess, these things, when their rocker covers do leak. They just seems to go everywhere, but this one's really clean.
Awesome.
And spark plugs as well are a good thing to check because they do sit underneath the manifold on these ones, the intake manifold. So we will probably pull out one close to the front here and just have a quick look at it, and we'll get an idea of the condition of the spark plugs, because I would hope that they've all been done.
So that brings me to a point that we've just noticed a couple of things since we've had it, and one of those things was the fuel consumption, and it runs okay, but it just seemed, you would think you're getting a bit more power out of a 3.5 V6 engine. And you said that you were going to you had an idea what that
potentially
could be, or where were you?
I've got an idea of potentially what could be the problem there, and that's actually the mass airflow sensor. They are fairly common on these for having the odd few issues here and there. And not reading correctly. So we will have a check of that shortly and see if it's reading correctly.
Those spark plugs seem to be hard to get to, eh?
They're not the easiest. Like this one here, the lead is fairly short, so it's not allowing me to be able to pull through, but there we go. A little bit of oil around there, but we'll have a look down inside the well. No, I think it's just a bit of residue that's in there. There's nothing really much to see, but we'll pull a spark plug out and have a look anyway.
See what's going on, yeah.
So the condition of a spark plug can tell you a fair bit about how your engine's actually running.
Yeah, right.
So just looking at that, it is, I'm going to say potentially running a little rich.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that phone's not going to stop today. Yeah, I would say that these probably aren't too old. These spark plugs, like they certainly haven't been replaced recently, but they're not too old. Yeah, just looking at that, I'm going to say it is possibly running just a little rich.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll look a bit more into that. So,
With the carp and the oyster dam.
yep. Just noticed you've got a water tank in there, so
Yeah.
yeah. It looks like someone may have sprayed this with a bit of fish oil or something at some point.
I know the boys have sprayed something on
Have
there
they?
recently.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, basically, I'll normally start from the back and work my way forward.
Yep.
So usually, and I always kind of check this as well. I had one actually earlier on in the week. The tow bar wasn't even bolted in properly, and they tow a caravan with it.
Oh wow.
Now I ended up finding out that it wasn't the exact tow bar for the vehicle. Anyway, they're going on a big trip. They've actually booked in to get a brand new tow bar fitted, and they said no one in the 3 years I've owned the vehicle, no one's ever told them about it. And out of the 8 bolts that are supposed to be in there, it had 5. And it wasn't even the right tow bar for the vehicle. So it's one thing I always check is just make sure that they're actually tight.
Yep.
And they're still in good usable condition. So, and obviously all the bolts are there too. So this one, although it's got a bit of surface rust on it, all the bolts are there. It's in good condition.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's like it's had this rear bar made up.
And there's our diff breathers. Diff breathers there.
Yeah. Well, that's the breather.
Yeah.
That's actually a line that goes into your air locker. That one there.
Okay.
So yeah, it's had the breathers extended. Obviously they go possibly up towards the engine bay somewhere. Yeah, so we'll start kind of with the suspension bushes. So it's obviously had a suspension upgrade. It's got EFS leaf springs in there, which look like they're a slightly heavier duty spring. They've got their 5+1, so they are a fairly heavy duty leaf.
Yep.
Bushes seem to be in fairly good condition. They're a greasable shackle pin as well.
Yep.
So we'll just kind of look over at these bushes. Now you'd want to always give these a grease up as well. kind of every service. Not too much grease because it makes a lot of mess, but just to keep them well lubricated inside.
Yep.
Just check the U-bolts out as well. Just make sure they're still in good condition, they're tight. Usually once these things are tight, they're never going to loosen off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then yeah, we check out the condition of the brake pads themselves, and you can kind of get a bit of an idea of the rotors. It's you know, does pay to pull the wheels off sometimes to get a better look, but we can see through here fairly well that there's still quite a bit of material left on the pads themselves.
Yep.
Something that gets overlooked fairly regularly is the actual flexible brake hoses.
Yeah. Right.
You kind of want to give them a little bit of a clean off with your thumb or your finger and just flex them slightly, just make sure there's no cracking or perishing in these flexible sections, because they can break.
Yep.
Under an emergency braking or a lot of load. They can break if they're very old and worn, and that's not going to be a good day. So I always check these. Just check around the base of the calipers as well to make sure the pistons aren't leaking or anything like that. These ones look really quite dry in there. And then axle seals as well. You can kind of see through in here. If you're going to have a leaking axle seal, you'd see that would be wet.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
yeah, so you got some Allman Emu nitrocharger shocks on here, which are a pretty decent shock absorber.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are a pretty decent shock absorber. Yeah, they're fairly good quality. So you can see the bushings top and bottom. Just have a look at those, because your shock absorber can be the best in the world, but if the bushes are all damaged and worn out, they're not going to help much. Yeah. So again, looking at the leaf eye, the front leaf eye there, check the bushes out. These don't actually have a greasable pin in there, they just it's fine. They don't tend to move around quite so much as what the shackle end will. Pinion, just have a look around, see if that's
So what are you looking
dry
for
around there. Yeah, sometimes you can get a pinion leak, and you'll see oil in around here, and if they're really bad it sprays all over the place, but that's nice and dry there. Check the mufflers out, make sure the baffles are good in those.
Yeah, that's
I
actually
think-
it's already been in for one of those checks.
Yeah.
So,
That doesn't
Muffler
look.
king?
Yeah, that muffler's recently been put on, is it? Or?
no, just to check,
no.
because there was a leak at
There was
at
a
the
leak.
front, at the flange, so
Yeah,
I just got
okay.
him to go right through the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, this has been replaced at some point. You can see it's a lot newer than the rest of the
rest of it,
system
yeah.
there.
So what do we got here, Dan? You just-
So see, there's a little bit of play,
Oh, yeah,
bit of
I can see
movement
that,
off the extension housing there. That,
Just do that again for us.
yeah, you can see that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like there's an allowable amount. It is a little bit there, and that's inside of there. There's actually a big spline, and it's just more than likely the age that's kind of showing itself there. It is a little worn.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned because they all kind of go like that on these. They all get a bit of play and movement in that spline there.
Okay.
So long as you're not getting any clunking or excessive backlash when changing through the gears,
Yep.
not of paramount concern at this point in time. You need to worry about any certification for a 1-inch body lift. That's under the allowable amount. Let's set it up. Fairly well. Right.
What's going on here, Dan?
So this is a little, I'm not going to call it a mount because it's not. It's a stabilizer, and this
Oh,
basically,
so is that where it's hollow in the middle?
yeah.
Okay, let me have a look at that. Yeah, well, there's nothing in the middle of it.
Yeah, well, you can see all the rubber is split and cracked here. There isn't an awful lot on these, I'll be honest. They're fairly insignificant piece of rubber that goes in there. But what this actually does is when you're in low range, the torque of the engine causes the transmission to twist.
Yep.
And this here stops the transmission twisting too far and exerting excessive pressure on not only your engine mounts but your transmission mount. So I would recommend replacing this here, because you can see there is quite a bit of wear here. It obviously has been moving excessively.
Yeah, right.
I would replace this one here for sure. They're a very easy mount or stabilizer to replace, and yeah, it's well and truly at the end of its life there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good that we found that one.
Yeah, see that this gearbox mount has copped it all. So you can see it's actually collapsed and the rubber's come away from the. See that there? The rubber's actually peeling, delaminating from the.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
that's a replacement too.
So I would replace that one too. Yeah, the rubber's all split, and it is fairly sagged. So because that hasn't been doing its job, that little stabilizer, this has copped the brunt of the inertia there.
Okay.
Again, another pretty simple mount to replace.
Yep. Sounds like we're going to get a parts list, mate.
Yeah. Super common on these.
So what else have you found there, mate?
The front differential mount. So
Yeah,
this is on the rear of the front diff here. You can see there's cracks through there, and on this side here, it's completely split.
Yeah.
The rubber's completely split. So this will actually allow the differential to rock forward and back slightly, and up and down.
Yeah.
Again, when in four-wheel drive, but that can cause problems down the track.
Oh.
So it's a good idea to do that one. There's more mounts up here, but these ones usually are pretty damn solid. They're a different type of mount altogether.
So just going back, so this is part of the checks, obviously, that we're doing.
Yeah.
Mounts are important.
Yeah, mounts are important.
And they can go on older cars, is it?
Yeah, that's right. The engine mounts are gone as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that one's completely split through.
Okay. So can that be a safety issue, Dan?
Yeah.
If you don't attend to that?
Yeah, that one there is completely split through as well.
Can't see that on the camera.
So,
Just going to interrupt you for a minute. If you're interested in contacting Dan, here's his details and website, and he is in Mort Street in Toowoomba.
if I jacked up that engine now, there would be nothing holding it in.
Oh, serious.
Yeah. There's
Okay.
so yeah, mounts all round, I think.
Okay.
A remount
Well,
of the
at
whole
least, yeah.
drive line.
I suppose you'll come back to the bit of oil, I can see.
Yeah. So you suspected that there was a rear main leak.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to say you're probably right because we.
So I do get a few points for that one.
Yeah. So
What are we looking at there for anyone that doesn't know why we're aiming at that?
well, I always, whenever you've got a leak here around the base of the bell housing, always look as high as you can first to make sure it's definitely not from the top half of the engine, because sometimes you can get a leak that's up top and it tracks down the back of the block.
Yep.
And can look like that, and you don't want to go to the effort of pulling a transmission out to find that it was actually an oil leak at the top of the engine. So this one here, we can say with all certainty it is the rear main, because the top half of the engine is completely bone dry. And obviously that does look fairly fresh, that there, and it is purely located at the base of the bell housing here. So yes, that is a rear main.
So is that how would you say the extent of that leak? Is it something to worry about
Look, it's not.
urgently, or?
It's not. I've seen a lot worse, to the point that there's oil sprayed underneath the whole length of the
definitely not
vehicle,
in
which
this
is not that. So, yeah, it is definitely leaking, because you said that you gave it a bit of a clean down, didn't you? Prior to coming here a couple of weeks back or something.
Yeah.
And it's obviously leaked through again. So, not a leak that I would it is the hardest leak to repair, or the most labour intensive.
Yeah.
Not
And why is
one.
that, do you?
You've got to remove the gearbox,
Yeah.
clutch, flywheel.
Okay.
It's in behind there. So it is labour intensive. It isn't a leak that I would leave for prolonged periods, because what can actually happen, not only the mess and the oil loss, but sometimes oil can actually get into your friction plate on your clutch and contaminate your friction plate, and then you're going to get clutch slipping, shuddering, so on and so forth. The list goes on, and when that happens, you really don't have a choice but to do it anyway. So you don't want to be in that situation if you were towing or out on a trip somewhere. Yeah.
Now, for manual vehicles, probably any vehicle really, when you talk about rear main seal leaks, what else? So it's a big job that you got to take all the gearbox out. So
Yeah.
I think we talked about clutches before. So would you recommend
Yeah.
normally a replacement of your clutch?
Look, I base it off of two things really, and that is there, if I pull this gearbox out and I find that the clutch is very clean and dry, and it is in good serviceable condition, I'm happy to put it back on. If there is any oil contamination around that clutch whatsoever, I highly recommend to replace it, because you could potentially have a problem soon after putting everything back together. And also as well, assess the condition of the clutch. Is it worth putting a clutch back in a vehicle if it's only got 30% of its life left? Probably not, because that last 30% of its life could kind of come around pretty quick, you know. And
So-
then you've got to go through the whole process again 12 months, 18 months down the track. It
it's
just
fairly
doesn't make
labour,
sense. It just doesn't make sense to put an old worn clutch back on. No. So most of the time when I do them, I do a rear main seal with a clutch anyway. Like if I'm in there doing a clutch, I'll usually replace the rear main seal at the same time, and vice versa. If I'm in there doing a rear main seal, if the clutch it doesn't look in best of shape, I'll put a clutch in there, and that's usually a heavy duty aftermarket setup. So yeah, it really comes down to just assessing what it's like when it's all apart. I really don't like putting old parts back on a vehicle that I know isn't going to last a reasonable amount of time. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it and have a look at the condition of that inside of there. Yeah. And the rear ones.
Is that flexi hose there?
Yeah. So you're
Front brakes?
not going to be far off needing a set of front pads there.
Yeah.
The inner pad is certainly fairly worn. You've only got about a mil or so left there, which in this vehicle I'm going to say you're not going to kind of make it to this time next year the way it is. You're going to be looking at sooner rather than later.
Just because we've just got it as a benchmark to start from, I wanted to replace all the pads and possibly look at the rotors to make sure they're okay.
Yeah, sure.
Whether they needed skimming or replaced completely.
Yeah.
You want to make it safe for the young fella.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't know whether it's the not used to the bigger, and it's not a Prado, not used to the bigger, because obviously the bigger tyres and wheels and that would reduce your braking ability.
It does, it does. Not everyone needs to, or can afford to when buying a vehicle for like this kind of for the first time, I guess. Like, this is Lachlan's first vehicle. It's a four-wheel drive. Like, it is going to cost a little bit maintenance wise, but upgrading the brakes at some point to a good quality rotor with a heavy compound pad will make a difference. The reason being is they are designed to cope more with heat. The hotter your brakes get, the less efficient they become. So if you can eradicate that and dissipate the heat as quick as possible, it's going to be more efficient. So something like a Bendix four-wheel drive pad and a good quality rotor is going to make the difference. Yeah.
Better get him to start saving some money, eh?
Yeah, that's what I say. Like, it's not like you buy a vehicle like this. It's not people go, oh, I'm just going to go put $5,000 of worth of maintenance into it.
Yeah.
You got to pick and choose what you need to do first. But I do recommend when doing brakes on a four-wheel drive to use something that's of good quality.
Duty,
Cheap brakes do not last a long time. Anything that's got a little bit more weight, larger tyres, cheap brakes aren't going to cut it.
No. So Dan, I just noticed you're looking at tyre rods and ball joints. They're all been done for us.
It looks like they have been done because they're an aftermarket
that's
one.
A plus, isn't it?
Yeah, they're an aftermarket joint, top and bottom, and so are the tie rod ends.
Yeah.
And they don't look all that old.
It's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
For the young fella.
Same. It's had an outer CV boot done there.
Yeah.
On both sides actually. It's had the two outers done. So that's good.
Now, when I look up here, I just noticed there's a clutch part, but there's a bit of a thing going on here. So is that important?
Yeah. So that's the actual fork boot. It would pay for us to get a new one of those.
Sure. Yeah.
You can still buy them genuine, but there are aftermarket ones you can get, and they're a fairly universal kind of fit. But it is a good idea to have that because otherwise you're going to get sand and mud and whatever else wants to fly inside of there. So we'll get another one of those. Clutch slave cylinder looks like it has actually been replaced.
Oh well, okay.
But we always pull the boot back. Oh no, it is actually leaking. So that explains earlier why we had low clutch fluid.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's funny. It actually doesn't look all that old in there, but it is leaking. So we'll add that one to the list.
Okay.
Full contact. So you're on about that ring around the outside, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's normal.
Is it? So
That is actually normal like that.
So that's okay.
Yeah, well look, these rotors, just by looking at it here, they do have heat cracks in them, and if
that's a new rotor.
if we're going to do the brakes, we would replace these.
Yeah, I always told Lachlan that I wanted to do all the brakes anyway, just to freshen up.
Yeah.
I think I told him that he needs to save about $2,000, mate. For the start, anyway.
Yeah. But they're still in usable condition. They're not excessively lipped or warped.
Well, you'll take it for a bit of a test drive anyway.
Yeah, we will.
See what it looks like.
Yeah, so we pretty much had a good overview of what's going on underneath there, and it is all bits and pieces. There's nothing that I'm looking at and going, oh, this is a major problem. Nothing.
So it's just all maintenance.
It's just all a bit of wear and tear, a bit of maintenance stuff. We will obviously go through all the driveline fluids as well and just check what they're like.
Yeah.
But overall, it's not too bad. Yeah.
So we didn't take too much of a big risk, eh?
No, it's not too bad. Like it evidently has been used as a four-wheel drive. You can see that. Like it has taken a bit of damage underneath on that long-range tank, but they're built to kind of cope with a hit or two.
Yeah.
So we will check bearings and stuff next.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So
Dan's just having a look at the tyres and the age of the tyres. He's just
we've just worked out that these tyres are around kind of 12, 13 years old, and it shows because there's some pretty good cracks in the rubber here and perishing on the sidewall, as you can see. The recommended amount for a tyre is 10 years.
I think we worked out that one of these tyres are like $500 each.
They're not the cheapest. No, they're not. the one thing they do have going for them is they are a fairly thick sidewall, and although there's a few splits and cracks in there, there's still quite a lot of rubber. So I'm going to say that this is when there's a good tyre special on, probably get a set. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
They must have been the very first of the KMs and the KM2s. They must have been the very, very first of them.
Yeah, right.
Because the KM1 finished in. When did they finish making those? Must have been. I think like around when these were made. I think that's when they actually finished making the KM1s. Right. So
okay.
this would be the first of the KM2s.
Well, that's a good test for them, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what happens, they go brittle, don't they? Is that what happens?
Yeah, they go. The rubber dries out, it splits and perishes and cracks, and then eventually it just gets worse and worse until the point that they'll literally just start delaminating and falling apart.
Yeah. So Dan, this is the bearing check, is it now?
Yeah. So we're just gonna check for any movement in the front and rear wheel bearings. So the rear bearings on these are a non-maintenance types. They're not a floating hub. They're a full sealed press-in unit. They're not all that common for failing on these. They're pretty solid. If they do fail, you usually get a noise before you actually get any play or movement. And this one feels very good.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So we're moving on to the front one, mate?
Moving on to the front, so we're going to check for any movement or play in the steering and just have a feel and a listen to the wheel when it's actually rotating there, so you can hear any bearing noise. And there's no movement whatsoever.
Oh wow, cool.
That's nice and solid, and the steering's nice and solid, which I assumed it was going to be just for the fact that there's quite a lot of new parts in the steering there.
So I'll talk about steering, sorry to take off course there, but it's like there's a lot of play in the steering wheel. Is that the box? Just tighten the box up?
It could potentially be the steering
If
box.
you can't tighten the box anymore, is that a new box?
It potentially could have play in it, yeah. We'll have a look at that.
Sure.
Yeah, because sometimes you get a bit of play through the column. Like you can get a little bit of movement through the column as well. So we'll have a look and see whether.
I'm just jumping ahead here, mate. Sorry.
No, that's all right. We'll have a look and see where the movement's coming from.
Yeah.
But certainly not from anything hub to the actual steering arm itself. Yeah.
Awesome.
Or the relay rod, I should say. Little bit of movement there.
So this is the passenger side.
Yes, this is the passenger side, and you've got
bit of movement. Did you say?
tiny bit of movement in the bearings there. So that's just going to be a slight bit of adjustment and nip up.
Okay.
But it's it is negligible. It's
awesome.
Yeah.
As I said, we took a risk because we bought it pre-inspection. It's now getting its inspection now.
Yeah, so looks like it's got a set of aftermarket extractors on there.
Yeah, rightio.
The whole system, I think, has actually been made up. I don't believe any of it is the original.
Yep.
But yeah, you can see on this tyre here, this kind of shows a bit more so what I was talking about.
Yeah.
You can see how this first layer of rubber is cracking right the way through.
Yeah, rightio.
Yeah.
So that's a bit in worse condition than the other one.
Yeah. This is kind of where it goes in here as well, just off the bead. That's the bit that I worry about the most is here off the bead, because sometimes it can completely delaminate itself, and
especially when you're bearing down.
Yeah.
And bearing back up again. I suppose.
You'll get splits in here. Yeah, well, overall it's it's fairly sound. I think once all these things are fixed up, it's got plenty of life left in it.
Yeah. Cool.
Alright, we need to see if we get the power.
This is why you come to Dan the man. So I just happened to mention that the winch was going click, 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 and anyway, within 5 seconds, Dan's had a look at it, worked out the problem.
Pretty sure we've got a faulty earth to the winch itself.
Yeah.
So,
You mentioned something about the wire melted or something, or melted.
yeah, so there's a little boot that goes over the terminals off the winch, and one of them is melted. So I'm going to say that it's become fairly hot. There's a few reasons for that, but my guess is that there is some resistance there.
Okay.
More than likely because of the corroded terminals or an insufficient earth. But we'll have a look at that now and just see where we're getting power to. And then we can work out whether it's either not getting power or it is what I thought, a faulty earth, or there's no continuity to the actual field windings. So we will find out very soon.
All right. Cross our fingers, eh?
Yeah. I hope there's a good earth point underneath here. That looks like it's probably going to be a good earth point for me. That one there, maybe.
So Dan gave the old winch a bit of a smack, didn't you?
Just a
bit of a smack,
a little
yeah.
tap with a rubber mallet.
And we managed to get it in, but I think it's had its days, hey? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the terminals are excessively corroded. I can't even take them off to clean them. I think it's going to snap the actual stud.
Yeah.
So all we did is just bypass the ground with the jumper leads.
Enough to get it in.
A little tap and away it went. So,
So she's all back in now.
Yeah, so that's a good idea for a Christmas present for Lachlan.
Yeah, that's it. Yep, a new winch. So Dan, we sorted the winch out, but it's got no more life left in it. It's had its day, right?
I think it's time to be retired. That winch.
And now we're just looking at the map sensor. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
See if we can give it
over the years, I have found these to be fairly troublesome on these Mitsubishi V6s.
Yeah, rightio.
They're not the cheapest sensor in the world, or meter in the world, I should say. But it's always a good idea to kind of check the condition of these. Just have a look inside there. So these are they're a whole assembly that part of the actual intake itself. They're held on with these 4 bolts. Yeah, these can fail, and it can cause starting issues. It can cause fueling issues, and you get very low power, which is what you said you're experiencing.
Yes.
Fuel economy problems.
Yep.
Even misfiring, backfiring, things like that.
Yep. Are they a cleanable item? Can you clean them?
Yeah, we're going to clean this one now.
Cool.
With some special MAF sensor cleaner.
Okay.
It's a specifically designed for cleaning these. So we're going to clean this one up and see how we go with it. But I have done quite a lot of these over the years. They do seem to fail. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Finished all the inspection. Obviously, like I said to you, we've found a couple of things. Overall, the car is not too bad. Maintenance-wise, it seems like it's been fairly well looked after. Yeah, there's just a few things there that we're going to put on the list and probably prioritise more than some of the other bits and pieces on there. Yeah, once it's all fixed up, I think Lachlan's going to have an absolute ball in this thing. Like it's going to be a pretty decent vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've found that it's got a few little fruity items on there as well. Like it's got a water tank with a 12-volt pump. It's got a rear air locker and compressor with a tank as well, an auxiliary tank. And obviously it's had a suspension upgrade. So yeah, I think he's gonna have a good bit of fun in it when it's all done.
So major things right now before this car goes anywhere would be the engine mounts, isn't it?
I think probably we should pay attention to the mounts before anything else at this point. Yeah.
Well, mate, you've been awesome. We'll do a quick run through. You've got a Prado in here with a few little items that. And I thought we could run through that just for other people so they don't get themselves caught up with what can happen. So
it's a bit of an interesting story with this one.
So while I'm at Dan's, this good-looking Prado rocks up. So it's got a bit of a few little drums.
It's got a bit of history.
It's got a bit of history. I was going to say that. And who is the best person to bring your Prado to and have it sorted? Is this bloke here, Dan the man. So what do we got here, Dan?
Right. So basically, what happened with this vehicle about 30,000 kilometres ago is a piston decided to melt. Right?
Ooh, what year is this one?
This is 2010.
Yep.
So it's 2010 150 series. It's got a 1KD, 300,000, just on 300,000. When the engine failed, it's about 280,000. And what I was told by the customer is he was basically coming up the second range crossing here, which is not a massive gradient. No load on the vehicle, so not towing, not a lot of gear inside the vehicle, and lost all power. And then the engine started misfiring, and lo and behold, had it diagnosed by another workshop, and I think it was cylinder 3, he said. The piston had a big hole straight through it. Now, why did that happen? Many reasons why it could have happened, but it could have been a faulty injector. It could have been a metering or reading instrument, so either, like I was saying to you before, the mass airflow sensor, or potentially fuel rail pressure sensor, something like that was reading incorrectly, has caused the ECU to overfuel the injectors, basically. Well, there's a lot more technical reasons to that, or more technical terms to it, but basically it's overfueled in one way or another. So, as most people would know, the forums and the internet is riddled with potential issues with the 1KD injectors. This should have had a revised injector in it, just being the age of the vehicle. It would have been from about, I think, middle of 2009 onwards they had a injector revision. So I don't think it was anything to do with the injectors at all. I think that possibly there was something else, because, and the reason why I say that is because the injectors that are in this rebuilt engine are brand new, and the customer is still having problems. So this engine doesn't run particularly smooth at idle, and under load it actually surges, and he has had it previously diagnosed. It's the transmission has been ruled out. It is something to do with the engine, because the revs do actually flare and there is a bit of hesitation there. So there is something that is not reading correctly or functioning the way it should, because if you've got surging in a diesel engine, it's never a good thing, especially on a common rail. There's definitely an issue there. So I did actually have this in last week, and I ran through a few checks, and I did find that potentially the injectors have not been coded incorrectly. The compensation values are all over the place. So that's what we're going to look at today, basically. Everyone's phone's going off today.
Oh, I know, it's a phone call's going off, yeah. It's right when you're recording.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to look at today, and just see what stage these injectors are at. Have they been coded incorrectly? And then I'm just going to run through a few system tests and see what the rest of the sensors are doing, whether they are reading correctly, and just have a look at the software version in the ECU as well, just see if that is up to date.
And I see you got an iPad top of a thing there.
Yeah.
That's what you use.
Yes, this is the scan tool that I use, which is an Autel Maxi Elite, and I've done a lot of updates to this thing, so I've got the latest software in this. It's about 3 years old now, this particular machine, but yeah, all the software in it is right up to date. So yeah, that's what we're going to start with. If I do have other scan tools that I've got one that's a little bit more technically advanced than this. It's not as user friendly. If I need to, plug that in and use a scope or anything like that, we can. But we'll start off with this, and we should be fine.
And I'm going to give a plug for Dan. That's why you bring your Prado here, because he's the man. He knows what he's talking about, and I'll say he doesn't fluff around. He knows. Yeah.
We try to be pretty precise and not waste time, diagnosing in the wrong area.
That's right, or wasting people's money while you're doing that type of stuff. Yeah. So, all right. So, let you go and do your magic, mate.
Yeah. Hopefully I can have at least some answers for this guy, because he's kind of tearing his hair out after spending probably a fairly obscene amount on getting an engine rebuilt and a new set of injectors, and then 2 years on, he's still not ironed out the issue that he wanted fixed in the first place. I feel kind of sorry for him, because I do believe that he may have even mentioned this surging issue a fair way before the engine actually failed, which I'm going to say 100% that's what caused the piston failure. There's something's not quite right there.
You want to obviously nip that in the bud before you do it again.
Yeah, that's right. So I've been told that it is better than what it used to be, but as you know, these engines run pretty seamlessly when they're running well. So if it's got this surging issue, then there's definitely something wrong.
Yeah. So Dan, a bit challenging at the moment. What's going on?
It's temperamental.
Yeah.
So basically, what I think has happened with this is when the new injectors were installed to this vehicle, they weren't initially set up correctly. So basically, what we're having to do now is unlearn the ECU and because these are they're a variation of an adaptive learn ECU, we're now having to tell it to forget everything that it learned over the past 20,000 odd kilometers with these injectors, and reset everything back to basically a clean slate, reset the pilot learning, and then we'll go through and actually see what the injectors are doing. But it looks like this wasn't actually done initially, because I'm having a real hard time getting it to cooperate with me, and I had a suspicion that that was the case.
So what you're saying is their injectors got replaced, but no one coded them.
Well, I think they set the compensation values, but the pilot learning hadn't been done.
Okay.
In which case, yes, it would run, but it's not a full kind of a full procedure. Yeah, right.
Well, guys, we're going to leave that episode there while I leave Dan to work on this Prado. He's just going to take Lachlan's car for a bit of a test drive, and I'll let you know what happened to this Prado on another episode. Just having a few little problems with it. So I think the main cause, like Dan said, was new injectors. The procedures weren't followed through correctly, and that's maybe what's causing some dramas here. So anyway, thanks guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Prado 150 out of here. Cheers.